So join me in this journey as we explore some of the expected scientific breakthroughs for the year 2026. Another very beautiful, significant breakthrough we are experiencing this year, and we are expecting the mass production, is the area of using the CRISPR technology to address crops with shallow roots, such that those crops with shallow roots can survive during droughts when there is a low rainfall or no rainfall, as this will help us to address the problem of food insecurity for human beings and for other living beings. So currently, climate change is bringing longer droughts, making it harder for crops to get enough water, more especially crops with shallow roots. Many important crops still have shallow roots, limiting how much water they can reach and causing food insecurity for humanity. So the farmers need crops that can find water deeper underground without reducing the harvest size or the harvest quality. Now, this is what happened. Looking at this scenario, this is a plant with shallow roots. The root of a shallow root is between 1 and 16 inches. Right? Shallow roots cannot go beyond 16 inches in the soil. Now, in the case where there is no water up to this level, then such a plant will be malnourished and will reduce the harvest quantity. As a result, science has decided to take away the DNA of this crop and look for the DNA that is responsible for the production of the roots, for the growth of the roots, such that this DNA will then be altered using the CRISPR technology, and this DNA will be altered such that the DNA can produce a root that can go beyond the 16 inches down the earth and look for water. Instead of having a shallow root that go this way, right, we'll have roots that be able to go down and travel down the earth and look for water beyond the 16 inches. As a result, it is expected that once this DNA can be altered and the root can go beyond the 16 inches down the earth, there will be more harvest, which will be able to address the issue of food insecurity. So the scientific community has used CRISPR-Cas9 and CRISPR-Cas12 gene editing to make small, precise changes to the plant's own gene, which is the gene of the plant here, that control root depth and direction, such that the modified gene will be able to produce a root that will go deeper and absorb water from the soil better. Now, the good news here is that no foreign genes are added or modified. Only the gene for this plant is modified, unlike a GMO that requires that the gene from another plant will be modified and combined with this to form another plant. So in this case, there is no introduction of external gene modification into it. So the plant simply uses its existing strength more effectively and efficiently. So the advantage of this scientific breakthrough is that there will be higher agricultural harvest during the dry conditions. And currently, crops like rice, wheat, and maize have shown a clinical trial confirmation and evidence that this approach is productive and is effective. So this is a breakthrough in the scientific community once again. Another very significant scientific breakthrough which we are expecting the mass production in the year 2026 is the Internet of Forests, which makes use of the biosensors for climate protection. You will have observed in some forests where there are technological gadgets that are attached to each tree this way. These technological gadgets are called the Internet of Trees, Internet of Trees, IO trees. They are IoT, Internet of Things sensors that are attached to each tree to monitor the health of each tree. And these sensors will communicate through the satellite dish and communicate the health of each tree to the control center, such that professionals at the control center will be able to analyze and understand how healthy each tree is. Now, this similar approach is also being used for the case of IOF, Internet of Forest, such that if we have a forest this way, so the IoT sensors will be planted right in the soil through the help of drones, will be planted in the soil at certain distance, such that each sensor, each sensor will have to communicate with the satellite, and this data will be sent to the control center, such that the professionals at the control center will be able to monitor the health of the forest. Take for instance, if there is high temperature in this part of the forest, and this high temperature can lead to wildfire, which will eventually affect the whole forest. Then, right at the control center, there will be an alert that will show that the sensors here is capturing high temperature, and this high temperature means that there's likely to be wildfire. Hence, there could be a quick intervention to this part of the forest before it will escalate and go out of control, such that to now destroy everything in the forest and also become hazard to humanity. So this is the approach that the Internet of Forest is using. So in year 2026, tiny biodegradable sensors, which are IoT sensors, will be spread by drones across forests. These are the sensors, right? These sensors will monitor the soil moisture, the temperature of the forest, and the carbon levels of the forests. So it is expected that the mass production of this technology will take place sometimes in July 2026 with the companies like Bosch and Semtech. It is like installing a smoke alarms and moisture meters right in the forest, such that if there is high temperature, right, the control center will understand and they'll be able to address the issue of high temperature as against wildfire coming up. And in case if there is a high moisture, suspected high moisture in advance, like a month, 2 months in advance, this high moisture could lead to flood. So through control center, all this will be known, and so there can be a planning against flood taking place in any community. Countries like Australia that experience wildfire every year, and some other countries that also experience flood, all this technology will be useful to plan towards prevention. Again, thanks to the scientific community for this significant progress. Another very significant scientific breakthrough we are expecting this year is the Neuro-Restoration, where the brain is trained to reconnect back to the parts of the body which it couldn't communicate with before. So a typical scenario to illustrate this is to look at a blind person that cannot see, where the eyes is not really functioning, and there's an obstacle which is an hazard here. These eyes cannot see the hazard, right? Hence, the eyes cannot communicate with the brain. So there is disconnection between the eyes and the brain. So what the Neuro-Restoration tend to do is to install a camera in the eyes, so that this camera will be able to spot the hazard here, and this camera will then be able to communicate with a chip, a detector chip in the brain, right? Remember that the brain is really functioning fine. So this chip will be installed right in the brain. So this camera, which is acting as eyes, will communicate with the chip. Then this chip, with the brain interpretation, we understand that there is an hazard here for this person not to hit this hazard. And this chip will be able to communicate with the leg, such that the leg can stop not to hit this hazard and find a better way to pass beside the hazard. So this chip is called the implantable brain computer interface, BCIS. So, and that is the main idea behind the Neuro-Restoration. So currently, paralysis and blindness often happen because signals from the brain cannot reach the body or the eyes or the part of the body. It could be leg, it could be hand as well too. Existing treatments can help people to cope, but when there is lost movement or sight, in the case of total blindness, then it is really possible to restore sight in such a case. So the brain's message are still being sent, but the pathway is broken as there is no communication between the eyes and the brain. Doctors need a safe way to reconnect brain signals without damaging the brain. So with this approach of installing a camera here and a chip here, hence we automatically connect the brain and the eyes together, and it also connects the brain with other parts of the body as well together, right? So it is expected that walking, hand movements, and basic vision for people with severe injuries will be restored back. Currently, there is a clinical trial in place of this approach, and we expect that later this year, once the clinical trial is completed, then the regulatory body will give approval to this scientific breakthrough such that the implantable brain computer interface we have a mass production in the year 2026. We expect companies like Neuralink, BlackRock, and Neurotech companies to do this mass production once the approval has been given. Again, many thanks to the scientific community for this significant progress. Another very beautiful, significant progress which we are expecting the mass production in the year 2026 is the self-healing engineering, making use of the microcapsule engineering approach, such that damaged bridges and roads can automatically fix themselves where possible. So let us look at a typical scenario of crack this way, where we have wall that stands this way, right? And this wall, right, there's a crack right inside the wall, right? This crack will start extending outside, right, till it gets outside and it starts breaking. It breaks the whole wall into pieces, hence becoming hazard to humanity, and of course, quite expensive to repair, if not a total replacement. Now, the engineering world using the microcapsule engineering says, what about if we install an IoT sensor right here, or we have like 3 sensors installed at certain distance apart, right? Such that immediately there is this crack, initialization of this crack takes place, this sensor will be able to detect it, right? And this sensor will communicate through the satellite dish to the control center where we have professionals. And so the professionals at the control center will be able to know that there is a crack right on this wall or the bridge. Hence, it requires attention. Right. Now, furthermore, the microcapsule engineering says that there is need to install a particular microcapsule. Right. Now, this microcapsule will have a small sensor such that immediately this sensor detects this crack. Not only will it communicate with the control center, it will also communicate with this particular microcapsule, such that this microcapsule will automatically, right, discharge blue to the point of crack, here, such that there will be a temporary intervention to hold that crack together, which can still hold for years before the professional from the control center can come and attend to this crack, hence making our society safe, removing hazard from our society. So this is a typical description of the self-healing materials in the engineering world. So currently, bridges, pipelines, and offshore structures slowly wear down and corrode, often without visible warning. Repairs usually happen after damages become very serious, costing time, costing money, and even sometimes we have to lose life because they become hazard to humanity. So the question is, how can tiny cracks and damage be spotted earlier without constant manual inspection and emergency repair? So The smart way which the engineering has done this is to have introduced a smart sensors from the Internet of Things, which will continuously monitor the structure, and that is the sensor here, which will continue to monitor the structure and alert engineers when tiny damage appears and triggers a special coating from the capsule here, which will then release healing materials to seal cracks within hours, stopping corrosion and spreading. This technology is called microcapsule engineering. The initial production has been completed already before the 2026, and the large-scale industrial production, which will involve the coating polymer, is expected to start in year 2026, this year. We expect that this solution will be adopted in bridges, solution to bridges, pipelines, and the marine structure as well too. So this is a significant progress, and very big thank you to the scientific community for coming up with the solution. Ensure you like this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel. Till I see you in the next production. Bye for now.